So we're going to listen through the tracks one by one here. We're going to start with the kick, and this is pretty basic. So we'll solo the kick, start listening. Pull up the master a bit here just to hear it a bit more. It's a pretty standard, boring, computerized kick, and we'll listen to the snare. Also standard snare, has some ringing in it that like probably could be EQ'd out, but that's kind of out of the scope of this tutorial. Anyway, we'll go to the hi-hat. Also pretty standard, and also already panned actually. Everything's in stereo here, so it's already panned quite a lot to the left. And we'll listen to the tom fills here. And that's probably the same over here as well. Yeah, so it's the exact same fill all the way over. And we've already listened to these quite a lot, but we'll listen to them again a bit. We're just gonna lower the master a bit here. Listen to the strings melody. Something I'm going to do now that, as you can see here, we have the master. And also, in case you're not seeing this thing, this editor list at the left of the currently selected track, in order to reveal that, you go up to here to view, and you press show editor mixer. So I can remove that by doing that. And also that. And it's the same if you don't see this here, you can go up here and select editor list. And it kind of shows and reveals that. So that's just a minor thing. Yeah, so what I'm actually going to do now that I should have done in the beginning is I'm going to change the meters now. Thanks to Robin, we have tons of different meters in Ardour that are all great and have their own kind of use. What I like to do when I start out mixing, now when I finish mixing, that's another chapter, but I like to put it on peak just to see kind of how far we're riding the different volumes and the different levels. So I've changed this to peak. Like that. Let's see here. And yeah, okay, so this is also a little trick. Now down here, you can select where you want to put the metering point. And now, as I'm doing this tutorial, normally I'd have the volume of the master way up here, because that's, yeah, obviously that's the way it works. But this would ride the volume way too high in comparison to my, in comparing with my voice, and that wouldn't make for a very good tutorial and wouldn't make for a very good time for your ears and stuff like that. So what I've done is I've pulled the levels down quite a lot here, but I still want to see kind of how it would, like how the meter would work if I was mixing for real. And by putting this at custom, so this one controls where the metering point is. So this is before the sender, pre-sender, pre-fader, sorry, sender, whatever, yeah, and post-fader. And this is on the actual outputs, and this is custom, and this gives us a kind of like how a plugin looks here. And we can move this around like we want. We can put this post-fader, we can put this pre-fader. I'll put this pre-fader just to be able to visually see how the sound is kind of peaking, or yeah, how loud it is, without having to hear how loud it is out here. So if we start listening here again, you can see that the sound is almost up at 0, which yeah, is obviously something that we're going to deal with when mixing. But yeah, okay, let's continue. Let's listen to the guitar rhythm left. So a pretty basic strumming guitar, not very tight, but whatever. And these are just separate takes of the same thing. So together they sound like this. So yeah, so that's pretty okay. Listen to the guitar rhythm in the middle. Listen to the main guitar. Listen to this, it's called the guitar center. That kind of as you can see here with the regions, it kind of goes together with the tom fill, so it's kind of a build up for the chorus, which is this entire part. And we'll listen to the guitar melody here. Listen to the guitar melody too. And we'll listen to the final piece of the puzzle, the piano, which we actually already heard, but yeah. So yeah, it's basic, simple chords. Yeah, so now the reason we're going through all of these tracks one by one and not together is that we want to kind of form an opinion and a kind of sense of how they sound and what we can do with them separately. So obviously the drums, we're going to mix them together, and they are going to be controlled by each other, so to speak, in order to make a good drum blend. The same with the strings actually, and the same with the guitars, but still we need to go through them one by one and kind of figure out, okay, what's kind of a lead thing, what's something that can be a bit more in the background, and how can we pan these. Now luckily in order to limit you, I've named this kind of how I intended them to be panned, but I want to stress that obviously you can pan stuff and move stuff around just the way you want. You can even remix and do whatever you feel like with these tracks. But the original kind of point, as you can see here, was that this one's going to be panned to the left, this one's going to be panned to the right, this one's going to be panned in the middle, this one's probably also going to be panned in the middle, and this one's going to be panned in the middle, obviously, as it's called center. So now actually what we're ready to do now is we're ready to start doing a pretty basic mix. Now the first time around, and what this kind of tutorial covers, I'm not going to go into any great depth with either compression or equalizing, other than if something's obviously something has to be taken care of. So we'll do a follow-up tutorial series on a bit more advanced kind of mixing techniques when you start incorporating equalizing and compression and stuff like that. But if I can give any kind of word of advice, if you're just starting out and you're kind of in the middle, you don't quite feel like you get equalizing and things like that, is something that that I think I did wrong when I started out. Was I really wanted to use an EQ effectively and a compressor effectively, and I wanted to have it on every single track just because you're supposed to have that. And yeah, as I said, if I can stress anything, it's don't use EQ, don't start messing with that, and especially not with like advanced EQ settings, like trying to filter out specific things until you're actually comfortable enough to naturally kind of progress to that. If you're a beginner and you're struggling to kind of follow what I've done here, or you're just barely able to follow what I've done here, don't start and try to EQ your stuff before you're more comfortable, because it's going to be unnecessarily advanced. It's going to be, it's not going to sound very good, because a big part of, I think, progressing in mixing and learning mixing is to train your ears and have, for that you need proper gear, as you need a set of headphones and stuff like that. But it's more than anything to train your ears. And the thing is, when you start out, you're most likely not even able to hear the things properly that you want to, you need to filter out. So putting an advanced EQ on there and just going crazy with the different settings and trying to filter things out is probably only going to hurt you more than it's going to help you. So that's my little word of advice: to leave the EQing, leave the compression until you've reached that stage for real. It's obviously going to come a day when you're comfortable enough doing that, but don't start it out, because it's going to kill your spirits, because it's not very easy. Because like I said, it's not only about technique and not only about knowing how to handle an EQ, it's also about training your hearing enough to be able to discern what, and like knowing your gear, like knowing how your monitors or your headphones sound, and knowing like kind of when to react on, okay, maybe this is something that I need to lower. Maybe these frequencies sound way too harsh. I got to do something about that. So sorry, that's I shouldn't preach, but still, yeah, I felt like I needed to mention that, because I felt like I wasted a lot of time starting out by trying to do stuff that's more advanced than I can handle, and those hours would be better spent on actual production techniques and things like that. So anyway, sorry, that was a rant. But I'm going to what we're going to do now is we're going to start mixing actually, and we're going to aim here to do a very, very basic mix with a focus on balancing things and making things sound good together. So we're not going to try and do a super mega sound engineer deluxe mix where everything sounds perfectly tight and perfectly well, but we're going to start by balancing all of the elements, because we have quite a lot of regions, we have quite a lot of tracks, we have quite a lot of content here. Even if this isn't a very advanced song with a lot of content, we still have quite a lot of content. We definitely might have more content than we can handle unless we're pretty used to mixing. So that's what we're going to start by doing, trying to get kind of a balanced mix. So what I normally do here is I go into the mixer and I just pull all of the tracks down to absolute minimum. So we're going to do that here. Just grab the fader. One of the great things about Ardour is that it doesn't have these kind of knobs. Now some people hate that it doesn't have the kind of knobs mimicking or fader heads or whatever you want to call it, mimicking like how a mixer table looks. I actually think it's very nice, and it's usability wise way better actually, because you can look from afar and see roughly how you can get a sense of how strong this channel is, so to speak. Sorry, another rant. I guess I'm starting to get ranty here, so we better focus. So we pulled everything down. And now the idea is to start adding elements into the mix one by one. And something that I learned early on, I don't remember who taught me it or where I read it, but it's to kind of start, like a good mix starts with having a balanced drum kit balanced well with a bass. That's the kind of the backbone of a good mix, at least in hip hop and things like that I've traditionally mixed. And in hip hop as well, like what you want to have is you want to have a good balance between kick, snare, bass, and rap vocals. Those are the elements that you really need to worry about. Everything else is you can get away with mistakes there, but you got to get that balance right. Now this obviously isn't hip hop, but the same principle kind of applies here at least. So what we want to start off by doing is we want to get a kind of a good balance with the kick, the drum kit, and since we have no bass in here, we'll actually go for the strings, and then quite quickly put other stuff in there as well. But now But even before we start doing that, we're going to add something that I use in just about every single session that I have. And it is buses with effects on them. So the idea is that instead of having, say you want to have, because I use delay quite a lot, and I'm going to talk about that in a second when we start adding it, but say that you use a delay for almost all of your tracks. Instead of putting a separate delay on all of them, which is something that I did in the beginning, you add a bus that has one delay, and then you feed parts of the signal from the channel to the bus through aux sends. Now this might sound a bit tricky if you're very new to this, but I'm going to show you right away here. So what we want to do now is we want to add a couple of mixing buses that has effects on them. And more specifically, what we're going to add is we're going to add a bus that has a reverb, so we can feed as much as we want of the different tracks into one reverb, which both saves CPU and also makes it sound more uniform, as it's one reverb with one characteristic and not several reverbs. That will just muddy up the mix. And we're also going to add a bus with a delay on it, like I just spoke of. Also, so we can feed things to the same kind of delay. And delay for me is usually something that I use to kind of glue the song together, because if we have a delay that's set to the correct BPM of the song and things like that, and we feed stuff into it, everything we feed into it is going to have the same kind of delay. So it's going to form a very nice glue. I'm going to show you more practically now in a second here. And then finally, we're also going to add a bus that's a bit more, it's a bit more advanced, or whatever you want to call it, but I call it a wide bus, and it's basically me putting a lot of effects on there that I have no real clue of how they work, but they sound good. So it's a bus that you can feed stuff in order to make it sound wider and fatter, which is good if you want to have something sound a bit more stereo, or a bit more prominent, simply. So we're going to start by adding 3 buses. So, what you do is you right click down here. You can also go into track and add track or bus. You can press this, Shift Control N, but I always press this, right click down here. It'll bring up the add track or bus. And we're going to select buses here, because that's what we want to add. We're going to select stereo, and we're going to add 3 of them. We add them. And here we go. Here are 3 buses. I'm going to move them down here just because I accidentally added them in the middle here. And we'll make them small like everything else. And we'll go in and we'll double click this to rename it. We'll call this one reverb. We will call this one delay. And we will call this one wide. So for the reverb, we'll add a plugin here. I'm going to right click, add new plugin, go to the plugin manager, and we're going to use a plugin called Roomy, which is done by Harry van Haren in OpenAV. It's a reverb that sounds really nice. I think the reverb is based off of Fonz's legendary Zeta reverb, so it's good stuff under the hood as well. And we're going to open the GUI here, and so what I usually do is I set this very, very high and very, very kind of dry and wet. Now these things control kind of how big the reverb sounds, and this controls how wet the signal is. And since we're going to feed stuff into this, and this is going to be an all wet signal, we're going to put this at absolute maximum. We're also going to pull these ones here just to get a basic. You can experiment with these settings later on as well. But the important thing is to put it as at maximum wet, because this makes everything that we feed into here a very wet signal, which means that we can control the amount of reverb in the song by moving the fader here. Also, maybe a bit weird with that explanation, but I'll get back to that as we progress. So we're going to start by pulling this down to the middle, because the signal is very, very wet here. So we're going to have this at a pretty middle level to start with. We're going to change this later on. And now we're going to go to the delay, and here we right click, and we're going to add the plugin Golf vintage delay. We mark that one, press add, we press insert plugins. We go into the GUI here. You can see that it automatically set to the right tempo, and we're going to change this to stereo. We're going to change the medium to plain. We're going to pull in the same spirit as with the delay. This kind of controls how wet it is, more or less, so how much delay we get. So we're going to pull this one up to yeah, to there, around 0. Doesn't quite matter if you go up or down a bit, but yeah. And we're going to just put this up at 55% feedback or something like that. And most importantly, in order to make this sound kind of like a glue, it's important to pull the time L back to 2 and the time R back to 4. So this makes things go kind of as you'd expect them to go in beat here. We can do an, never mind, I'll exemplify this later on. Okay, so the wide buzz, oh sorry, we're going to pull down the fader here as well. And the wide buzz, on here, we're going to add 2 plugins. First, we're going to add Golf multi-chorus, so you can see there, add that. And then we're also going to add the MDA stereo tools. MDA stereo. Add both of these. Press insert. We're going to put this one first. And this, we don't need to change anything, or at least I don't usually do. As always, you can experiment the way you want here. You can try things out. This is the way I usually do it. I don't change anything here. I go in here though, and I change this, and I pull this up to about 90. So that's it. That's kind of how I put it. Save this. And we also pull this down to about a medium level. So now we're actually ready to start our mixing, just because now we have everything that we need to start getting a kind of a basic mix down. So let's start the basic mix down.